Hello. First of all, Happy New Year to all of you. Welcome to the Chapel for Europe, and thank you for being here tonight with us. As you know, this is the week of prayer for Christian unity, and that was the topic that we took and we thought about when we were discussing with Sarah these conferences, and this is a series of 3 conferences. Why this series of 3 conferences on how to disagree well? Well, the fact is that I didn't know before about Rose Castle Foundation, and by chance, or by the Holy Spirit, I saw their webpage and I contacted them. Because this idea of how to disagree well today, I think, is so important that I visit them in a wonderful castle that you can see now the pictures. And then I think, everything came together so easily that we figured out this 3 series of conferences. And today we are honored by the presence of Canon Snyder, who is the founder of Rose Castle Foundation, Reverend Dr. Sorin, representing the Romanian Orthodox churches to the EU, Father Manuel Barrios, Prieto, General Secretary of COMECE, and Reverend Fischbach, General Secretary of Canon. So, thank you very much. I hope that this is a get together to reflect what unites us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sabina. Thank you all for coming. Bonsoir, everyone. Sabina asked if I would share a little bit about the work of Rose Castle Foundation before we invite our very esteemed panel up and hear some reflections. So I'm going to show you in a minute a picture of the castle. Rose Castle Foundation is an international centre of peace and reconciliation that really exists to equip our Christian leaders, sometimes our faith leaders more broadly, to navigate conflict and change and chaos. So how to lead across some of the world's most challenging divides. And we work in conflict zones, and we also work in preventative places where conflict is kind of bubbling up, including the United States and many parts of Europe as well. So this is the castle. That's actually just a part of the castle. It is 800 years old. It sits near the border of England and Scotland, and for 800 years it's been fought over and ransacked by enemies. The enemies were usually the Scots, but sometimes they were also the English because the border moved. But it's been a house of prayer throughout all that time, and the middle part in the picture here is a very big chapel, beautiful chapel that we have. And after 800 years, the Church of England decided they would sell this property. It had, of course, been home to the Catholic bishops up until the Reformation, and then it was home to the Anglican bishops, I'm afraid, Father Manuel, after that time. But the church decided to sell it. They don't need castles anymore. And I happened to be asked by the Archbishop who I was working with, what would you do with this castle? And I'd spent my whole career working with the church in situations of conflict. And I said, given it was built to withstand an enemy, and given it's been a house of prayer for 800 years, why don't we reopen it as a house of prayer that seeks to unite enemies instead of to repel them? And he, in his wisdom, said, lovely idea, can you make it happen? And that was the start of the Rose Castle Foundation. We worked very closely. In fact, we came out of a program at Cambridge University in the UK called the Cambridge Interfaith Program, where for many years we've been bringing together faith leaders from Israel and Palestine, but also from other conflicted places. So we had a model of how we support enemies in a shared context, how we facilitate that process, and how we do it specifically by drawing on their faith and wisdom traditions. So we don't shy away from that. We ask them to bring their whole selves, their faith and every other part of themselves into the spaces that we open. Next slide. Very often, especially today, Katerina and I were speaking about this earlier, reconciliation is a bad word. It's thought of as appeasing or compromising or shallow agreement. And actually, the Greek for the word reconciliation appears about 11 times in the New Testament is katalage. I don't know, you can tell me how to pronounce it better, but it means really healing what is broken, so bringing together what has been torn apart. And I think that is a better understanding for the work of reconciliation. It's God's work. God is the reconciling God who seeks reconciliation of ourselves to him and ourselves with one another and ourselves with the whole of creation. So we are participating in a reconciling ministry that is bigger than us, but it's not about shallow agreement. I thought I'd illustrate how poorly the Anglican Church does reconciliation. This is two churches right next to each other in the UK, in Stoke Newington, and these churches had a disagreement about 150 years ago, and so half the congregation left and raised lots of money and built another church, literally just down the street. And still today they have two congregations. They couldn't agree on, I don't even know what it was they disagreed on. So we have so many calls to reconcile in the New Testament, and so many challenges to unity by Jesus himself and by St. Paul. This is just one of them, calling us to make every effort to keep ourselves united in the Spirit, binding ourselves together with peace, alert at noticing differences, quick at mending fences, diligently keeping the unity of the Spirit with the peace that binds us. And we also read in 2 Corinthians that we are called to be ambassadors of Christ and ministers of reconciliation. We're called to share the message, the gospel message of reconciliation. Again, that is upward reconciliation as well as outward reconciliation, as well as with the whole of the creation reconciliation. So it's not an optional extra for the church. It is utterly fundamental to who we are, and yet we're really not very good at it, globally. At Rose Castle Foundation, over decades of working in these situations of violent conflict around the world, we noticed repeat qualities again and again that came up in people who are regularly crossing the front lines. And they may be grandmothers or other women, they may be children, they may be trained chaplains and mediators, it doesn't matter who they are, but these are the kinds of qualities that we were seeing again and again. And we decided to distill them into 12 what we call habits of a reconciler. And we do a lot of work in seminaries now, trying to help congregations and new ordinands to look at each of these habits in the context that they're working in or serving in, and also in their biblical tradition, their wisdom tradition. And we find that actually these same qualities have huge resonance with people outside the church, so people in other faith communities as well. And just to name a couple for you, we often will start with lament, which for us, if you turn to the next slide, is naming what is wrong. That's almost the beginning of a reconciliation process. It's about acknowledging something is not right, and then being able to move on from that. So that's very often a starting point, and then we can move straight to hope at number 12, the ability to see beyond the current crisis and to reimagine a context in which our disagreement doesn't go away necessarily, our differences don't go away, but we're able to collaborate along with those disagreements. And just one other that I'll pull out, because it's relevant. We're kindly being hosted today by the Chapel for Europe, thank you. Hospitality. Very often as church, we are taught to be good hosts of others, and that's the big emphasis, but that's only half of hospitality. We also need to be the guests of different people, the risky guests, if you like, of people in their less comfortable places, eating their less comfortable food, or sitting in their less comfortable traditions. And that's the other half of hospitality. So we often call it risky hospitality because it's not easy. Yeah, next one. Thank you. One of the projects that we have run in conjunction with a number of universities in the UK, Oxford and Cambridge and Aberdeen and Durham, we've been working with theologians, Bible scholars, sociologists, psychologists and others to look at each of those 12 habits in the Christian tradition. And each of the groups that we worked with were ecumenical, so we were looking right across a whole range of different Christian traditions. What does our tradition teach us about hospitality or about curiosity or vulnerability or stewardship? And then reflecting back, how might this support those who are teaching and pastoring in these communities? What can we take forward from that? And then one other project that we ran recently, we've been inviting Ukrainian church leaders, again ecumenical leaders, to step out of the context that they're in. And this particular group here, this is at Rose Castle in our apple orchard, where every single tree is a different apple. So it's got an amazing, there's lots we can do symbolically with this orchard. But the pastors were struggling with how to lead their congregations when many of the congregants are in the military, are fighting, and many others have also lost people to violence. And a kind of non-violent gospel message somehow seems shallow in that context. So they were really challenged by how do we preach, how do we teach, how do we pastor in this kind of context. And that's what they came together and learned so much from each other through times of prayer, Bible study, wrestling with different ideas that they each had, and also discovering that they can sleep a whole night without having to worry about being woken. That was the first massive difference that they noticed, to have some sleep before they went back home. So I think that's the end, and thank you. We can think of some questions afterwards, but I want to invite my colleagues to come up on the panel if you're happy to. And we can share a little bit of reflection on Christian unity before we open. So we have Reverend Frank and Father Sorin and Father Manuel. And actually, this panel is a miracle in itself because we are representing Christian unity right here in front of us.
Mission done.
Mission done. So, given Jesus prayed for the unity of his disciples, and in fact, by implication, for all the church, why do we find it so difficult? And how can we, are there any ways we can overcome that? I might start with you.
No, I will leave the floor first to Frank Dieter, because we might be accused of Catholics of always having a bit.
Okay.
No, not at all.
Reverend Frank.
But we don't start now to ping pong.
No.
So, but really, just to say at the very beginning to start, but not make now a concise elaboration about all what could be on this very, very huge and deep question be said. Perhaps I try to raise 2 points, and then I'm very pretty sure you will put on other points or also contradict to that, and we will see where we go. First of all, I think it's interesting that Jesus is praying for the unity, which also means it is not automatically there, and we cannot automatically say, well, yeah, there must be unity in the discipleship. So there is something about praying for it, that it is a kind of fragile unity, let's say. And I think there are also some lessons to learn, also here in Europe and in our work, to say that when we look to the disciples that Jesus has chosen, it is already a very diverse fellowship or community, yeah, with fishermen on the one side, on the other side, a tax collector, so people from very different points of the society, of life, bringing them together. And I think that they are together is because of Christ. So that is already a little bit of an answer to our, I think, also ecumenical life, is that at the end, with all the questions we are discussing in a theological, academic way or on a practical way, it's, I think, always also about our relationship with Christ, and Christ in the center of our life, of our church, of our way going with Him, and that brings us together. And I think the Bible and also the testimony of the New Testament is also very, I mean, sometimes it's really, it speaks about life in a somehow crucial way also, because, I mean, if you look into what is happening then, you also see already this fragility again. I mean, Paul, who is speaking, and you have quoted him a lot here about unity and so on, also he said at a certain point, no, Marcus and Bartholomeus, they will not come with me anymore. Yeah, we have a dispute there's something happened, and I do not go with them anymore. We have to go differently now. So there, also our Bible is there speaking very honestly about a reality which also we are facing, and what does it mean? So that is this point of fragility in which we are, also as Christians. We are human beings under the conditions of this world with our emotions, and that happens. Yeah, but Christ is calling and praying for the unity, and I think that is something. But then also I finish, because somebody else also should speak something about much more about that. Perhaps that is a point where I think we can say in the last 150 years there has also something developed positively between our churches, because we came much more together, speaking with each other, working on ecumenical life, doing things together. Also, for instance, here in Brussels, in our work together towards the European institutions, than ever before, let's say. So there is also something happening where I would say there is something positive and optimistic. Optimistic is not the right word, but positive about it, encouraging about it. That we learn, I think, a little bit more to hear this call to unity, walk together, learn together, praying together, and seeing where can we go, where we can go forward. I don't want to make it now easy and color and nice, yeah, but I think there is also something to tell in a positive way. Yeah. Perhaps for the moment there's much more to say, but yeah, others should take the floor now, like Father Manuel.
I just wanted to say that I often wonder, when Paul and Barnabas had their sharp disagreement and went their separate ways, the church grew more because the missionary journeys were extended into different directions. So whether that was a positive. Father Manuel, do you want to read?
Well, yes. I think it's important that we are having this meeting today, and I was thinking about this on the issue of unity, Christian unity, and also with the help of the Rose Castle Foundation, with these attitudes that help to reconcile. I think it's important that we're celebrating this meeting in this week of prayer for Christian unity. I've been involved in this many years because I was responsible, as some of you know, I was responsible for ecumenism in the Spanish Bishop Conference many years. So we received the material from the World Council of Churches, from the Pontifical Dicastery for the Promotion of Christian Unity. We received the materials for the week of prayer are agreed together and are prepared together. This year, the materials for this 2025 Week of Prayer for Christian Unity are prepared by the monastery of Bolse in Italy. Some of you know it's a very important monastery in northern Italy, an ecumenical monastery. It's also a mixed monastery. You have males and females. It's very interesting. And they prepared the materials for this week on basing themselves on a text that we find in the Gospel of John, which is taken from that encounter between Martha and Jesus when Jesus goes to Bethania. Martha's brother had died, and they have this encounter, and at the end Jesus asks Martha, he says, I am the resurrection and life, do you believe this? So the theme of the week of prayer for Christian unity of this year is, do you believe this? So it has to do with faith. And why this is important, I'm coming to your question. Why this is important? Because we are celebrating this year the 1700th anniversary of the Council of Nicaea, which was the first ecumenical council in 325. And so the basic message of this week of prayer for Christian unity is the Nicene Creed that we pray. And then this was an attempt of the early church to get to a unity in faith, to establish what are our core beliefs. And this, after much discussion, divisions, and so on. So it was a process to arrive to something, to some affirmations of the basic things that we believe as Christians. And so we could recognize the other with his or her cultural difference as part of our community, because we believe the same things. So going back to the question that we're asking today about Christian unity, why is it so difficult? I would answer in this way. There are many things that bring us to divide from each other, even as Christians. Our cultural differences that sometimes are very big. Sometimes there are differences that have to do with personality, with ways of being. Sometimes these divisions are also due to our sin, to our pride. And so I would say, what is important is that we understand what kind of unity we're looking for, and two, we use the instruments that might bring us to a greater unity. Or as the word was put today, to reconciliation, to a reconciled unity of the church. So a text that was, apart from the text I quoted before of the Gospel of St. John, chapter 11, on the encounter between Martha and Jesus in Bethania, the biblical text that we had as inspiration for today is a text, and Father ÞELARU will talk about this a bit later, is a text also of the Gospel of John, but it's taken of chapter 17, which is the priestly prayer of Jesus. Jesus prays for the unity of his disciples. And he says, praying to the Father, my prayer is not for them alone. I pray also for those who will believe in me through their message, that all of them may be one, Father, just as you are in me and I am in you. May they also be in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me. I have given them the glory that you gave me, that they may be one as we are one. I in them and you in me, so that they may be brought to complete unity. Then the world will know that you sent me and have loved them even as you have loved me. So it's a very important text. It's really the basis. And I like to think of it in this way. Ecumenism, our effort to reconcile Christians, or our effort to create unity between Christians, is something that is the desire of Jesus. It's not a human endeavor. It's something that we receive. Jesus wants a unity. But also from this text we can have another conclusion. What is the unity that we're seeking? Christ here speaks of the unity between him and the Father. It's a unity in relation. It's unity in love. It's a deep unity. So I think that is also important. What is the unity that we are seeking as Christians? It's a unity that has to do with our being, with our relationships. And I think this is important. Important. How can we promote this? How can we promote this unity, which is a unity in diversity? It's uniformity, as we said before. It's a rich unity in diversity. And I don't think as Christians we have to be scared if I, as a Catholic, see that in another church the Eucharist is celebrated in a different way, maybe the same faith is expressed with different words. I have to really think of a deep unity, what really unites us. Goes beyond words, it goes beyond cultural differences. So this would be my introduction. I would say a bit more, but I will leave it there. For me, the key word, apart from these attitudes, the key word to create unity is dialogue, which is not a strategy, it's really a deep attitude of encounter with the other person. And we have to get trained to this, because I think sometimes we are afraid of dialogue, or we are scared of losing our identity when we dialogue. So dialogue, I think, is really, really important. Learning to dialogue. And I'll conclude here, and I take this from the Focolare movement. Real dialogue is always kenotic and transformative. That means when I dialogue with a person, in some way I lose myself to find myself again. That was Ken's meaning. And also, dialogue is transformative. When I have real dialogue, something changes in me without losing my identity. And this, I think, is what we need.
Thank you. Father Sorin, would you like to share a reflection on John 17 or any other thoughts?
Yes, thank you so much for inviting me this evening in the framework of the Week for Christian Unity. I prepared something written, and believe me, it's good for you to to listen, because I'm more fluent when I'm reading something than when I speak freely. I will start with a self-critical approach. In this, it's striking this exactly in that direction you mentioned about disunity, Christian disunity, and afterwards I will land with a spiritual theological reflection on Christian unity, if you allow me.
Yes, please.
So, much has been said and written about Christian unity, and much has been done to promote it. It's so difficult to say anything new. But given our setting tonight, please allow me to say a few words starting from a tangible observation. And as Frank Dieter said, Christian unity is not just a commandment of Christ. He prayed for it. But still, we as Christians are not very serious when it comes to unity. And I'm not just referring here to the communion, or better to the break of communion between the large Christian families. I refer first of all to the church I represent, the Orthodox Church. Unity does not exist among Christian Orthodox in all issues. One disputed issue is the question of unity itself. In other words, we disagree on what unity really is and how it works. We are disunited about how the church should be organized and governed in certain regions in order to express and manifest her God-giving unity and the unity of all things in God. Just think of the fact that here in Brussels there are 6 or 7 parallel Orthodox jurisdictions, each with its particularities and ambitions. This unity exists also when we cannot agree on who is the first among the Orthodox churches, or who can and has the right to grant what we call autonomy or autocephaly to a new Orthodox church. What is happening now in Ukraine is tragic because two Orthodox people are killing each other. And the instrumentalization of the Orthodox Church is not just about slogans. Of course, stupid and wrong slogans, such as holy war. There is not holy war for a Christian except perhaps the inner one, with its passion and evil spirits. So the instrumentalization of the Orthodox Church is not about slogans, but is reflected in the inter-ecclesial struggle between the different Orthodox churches in Ukraine. There are Orthodox brothers who take by force the churches or place of worship of the other Orthodox brothers, who use force against other Orthodox priests and communities. It is tragic. But closing the example of Ukraine and returning to the question of unity in general, one could say that we, as Orthodox, we are not united on how to understand and practice unity within ourselves, and at the same time, how to practice unity with the others. Because even this aspect is not very clear in the Orthodox ecumenical perspective, how to relate consistently to other Christians, to other Christian families. So, you see how using your words, how we Orthodox disagree well. That's why the understanding of the Christian unity and its manifestation in the concrete life of the Church should be a permanent concern for us, both at the intra-Orthodox level, but also in a society that is becoming increasingly pluralistic, secularized, divided, and polarized. But despite all these challenges, however, a certain common ground can be observed in the spiritual, theological, fundamental approach to Christian unity. All Orthodox agree that unity is good when it's unity in God, and that there can be no Christian unity without the unity of all in God, who himself is unity, communion, koinonia or koinonia. There is a profound sensitivity in Orthodoxy for the mystery of the Holy Trinity, and also for her real presence in the life of the world. Church life partakes of the life of God, one and three, and of the mystery of unity and diversity. The primary and the ultimate goal of the church unity is the salvation and the sanctification of men through the perpetual actualization of the communion between God and the human being, manifest once for all in the person of the incarnate Word. The Church Fathers teach that only, I quote, what is united with God is saved. And it is in the Church that this, or the divine life, is communicated to human beings. As an image of God, the Church brings people together in the love of the Trinitarian God. A 7th century father of the Church, his name was Maximus the Confessor, said, I quote, "The Church of God is an image of God, because it realizes the same union of the faithful which God realizes in the universe. As different as the faithful are, by language, by place, and customs, they are made one by it through faith." End of quotation. The church identity is truly unique. It is unity gained by partaking of Christ, God and man, by common participation of believers in the unity of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, as St. Cyprian said. So the church as a means of restoring people to the communion of love with God and with one another can have no other source and model than the Holy Trinity. Therefore, when Jesus speaks of the Christian unity, about the Christian unity and prays for it, He does not give as an example for this unity either the Roman Empire or the Hellenistic Republic or any other form of political or social organization, but the interpersonal relationship of the Holy Trinity. The words of Jesus are often quoted, ut omnes unum sint, that all may be one, but often overlooked is the how, that is, the model of the Trinitarian life. And I quote, repeating Father Manuel, as you, Father, are in me and I in you. The prayer of Jesus for the Christian unity shows that the Trinity is not only the model for the life of the Church, but I already said also the source and the finality, so that they may be one in us, as we are one. Therefore, the unique source and supreme model to Christian unity remains for us Orthodox the Holy Trinity, as eternal communion or koinonia of different, equal, and yet inseparable persons. The revelation of truth as life, love, and koinonia is also the revelation of the fact that the realization of unity with God and with fellow human beings implies not only coexistence, but proexistence and self-giving, and also implies the crucifixion of both individual and collective egoism. The Christian unity is then a question of Christians' love for God and for one another. Divisions in the Church are always a fall from the state of love. The responsibility for disunity and divisions in the course of the history is different, but the responsibility for realizing the visible unity of Christian is the same for all, because love is a problem of Christian identity. This is how all will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. These are the words of Jesus. The desire for more fellowship among Christians is in fact the search for the Trinitarian life, or for the Holy Spirit who communicates the Trinitarian life to the Church. Moreover, when we desire harmony in our family or in our society, between nation and people, we are consciously or unconsciously striving after the life of the Trinity, in which persons live without division and isolation, without confusion and uniformization. And I will end this first part with this conviction, sharing you this conviction. Broken or divided Christianity is first of all a judgment on Christians themselves. Not only on those who have directly caused the divisions, but also on all those who are indifferent to the question of unity or communion with their brother and sister in Christ. Thank you.
Thank you. And what a challenging place to leave us. I wanted to ask, maybe back to you, Reverend Frank, how, if we even were to imagine the visible and the invisible unity of the Church, how that might offer, or whether that might offer any hope to Europeans today living in a highly divided, polarized world.
Well, coming from the Conference of European Churches, perhaps to start with that, we are a fellowship of 114 churches from all over Europe. We are not a community of church, because we are really diverse churches with members of the Orthodox churches, the Protestant Church, the Church of England, and different other churches. But nevertheless, I think it became clear in this fellowship that by the call of Christ, and also what you in a deeper way now explored in the Trinitarian understanding of our faith and of our church and churches, we came to the conviction that this is really a fellowship where we should be together and work together and walk together also into the time and what we can do together by praying, but also by working together, exchanging together, and doing things like, for instance, in Brussels together. And here not only with us, but also thankfully and very nice together with the Catholic Church also together. And contribute here from what is given to us to the public sphere and to, for the common good of people in Europe. And I think, and that is also what is happening for the moment, I really do not want to give a picture of an easy fellowship in the Conference of European Churches. It's really a very diverse, colorful body of churches coming together. But what we experience for the moment, especially in this Europe where many feeling apart and where the divergences even get broader and more polarized, that church members and churches are saying it's good that the Conference of European Churches exist because we want to keep this together in this time of troubles in Europe and see how we can do something for Europe and in this world for the churches, but also for the people in Europe. So that is something I think what we've got after the Second World War as a starting point and also somehow as a gift to our churches and to our fellowship to work with, and from which we try to contribute to the questions in our time. And there indeed, dialogue is one of the most important instruments, between our churches, but also beyond our churches here in Europe, and to bring in what we find out together and what we would like to share in a broader way to the public sphere.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you.
I think it's an important question. We have certain differences inside our churches, inside our own church and between churches. We have divisions. Sometimes these divisions come from inside the churches. Sometimes they come from issues that are outside the churches and affect our churches. For example, we have spoken about Ukraine as an example. There's a very, very sad situation where Orthodox are fighting against each other. That I think is something that comes outside the church and affects relations of the churches. So I would say, are we as Christians called in some way to look for instruments of unity that can help also our societies in which we live? And maybe yes, maybe we are called to give an example of working for unity that can also be helpful to the broader society. I think with dialogue we can try to maintain the possibility of polarity in our churches, between our churches, without arriving to polarization in some way. I have this experience. As Secretary General of COMECE, the Commission of the Bishops' Conferences, a bit less than for CEC, but there are also different sensibilities in the Bishops' Conferences in the European Union on many issues. An issue, for example, that is seen differently in Germany or in Poland and Hungary is the issue of migration. And when we gather as bishops of different bishops' conferences, we see that certain European issues are seen in different ways. But I think there we are called to give a witness, an example of listening to each other, and maybe to be able, not diluting our differences, but maybe expressing them and living them in a different way, not arriving to polarization. Sometimes I have been a witness that in our meetings there is polarization. Sometimes we see that two persons don't hear each other, or they don't manage to overcome their precompressions or prejudices that they might have. So maybe as Christians, I think we are called in some way to give an example to this world of how differences can be lived, maintained, and in some way overcome. And as Frankito was saying, there is something that really unites us as Christians, which is our faith in Jesus Christ. And I think that is also Father ÞΕΛΑRU was saying this, is a source, it's a force that brings us towards unity and a deeper unity that is compatible with some differences, not very big differences, but compatible with some differences.
Thank you.
So, just to add a few words, of course I'm among those who believe that the European society was shaped by Christianity.
Yeah.
May disagree with me, but I'm one of them. And just to give you one very simple example. I don't know if they are French-speaking person in this world. When you are listening to the radio and they are relating about the European summit, sometimes they are calling the European summit as conclave. You know the word conclave? The word conclave is from the church, is the synodality, it's a reality which manifests the synodality of the church. And I'm not really sure that you are aware of it, and you also. But the both of you are working for the synodality. The COMECE, it's a model for the synodality because it's bringing together all the bishops from the European Union. The conference of the European churches is the same. You are working for the synodality, and as you gave this, you remember that this year we as Christians were celebrating Nicaea. For us it's very important because Nicaea was the first ecumenical, so for all the Christian synod or council recognized by all the Christians, but also it gives us the first ecumenical creed. It's the first ecumenical creed. Before that, it exists a lot of credo in all of the Christianity. And for us, it's a model of how to gather together and also trying to overcome the disunity, but also to listen the others. And I will just read a small quotation. I was not prepared for speaking about Nicaea, but I have a small quotation from the Fifth Ecumenical Council, where in the preamble of the decision of the faith, they are giving, I think for me, is the most beautiful testimony what synodality is for the church and for the world, and the importance of the synodality.
Yeah.
Just small phrases. So, the Fifth Ecumenical Council said like this, I quote, "The Holy Fathers dealt with the heresies and current problems by debate in Canon, because the truth cannot be made clear in any other way when they are debated about question of faith, since everyone requires the assistance of his neighbor." End of quotation. So, since everyone requires the assistance of his neighbor. This is the Fifth Ecumenical Council. So for us, at least for us as church, we need this synodality to rediscover this synodality, to put it in work, but also to present and to present to the actual world, to the society, saying that we have to discuss, to have this debate in common.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Wisdom comes surely from exactly that, you know, the ability to listen to our neighbours, particularly our different neighbours, as we are wrestling with decisions that need to be made. And yeah, thank you. I have another question, but I'm going to throw it out to everybody, I think, because I'm sure there are people who, many people here who might want to contribute. And it's a very practical question about how you see churches being a reconciling presence in the midst of your communities, your parishes, in the midst of conflict and change. Do you see examples of that? Can you share those, or do you not see examples of the church being a reconciling presence in those spaces? And then do come in with any other questions that you would like to as well. I think we have a microphone, do we, to share? But yeah, that question, if any of you want to reflect on that first, but we'll throw it out to others too.
Thank you. My name is Manuel. So I just want to give an example that we lived in this chapel 1 year ago, more or less. So I participated in a group, in a network of women who are Jews, Muslims, and Christians, and also non-believers. And after what happened in October last year, this group that has been building a friendship for many years broke. And the Jews and the Muslims, they start using social media, and then they decide, but we need to talk to each other. And then they said, but we need a Christian to help us. And then they thought, but we need a neutral place to meet. Why don't we go to the Chapel for Europe? And then I contacted Bernd and Sabina, and they say, of course, welcome. So this is an example lived here, and there was a reconciliation in this group. We cried a lot. It's in the arms of the other. Maybe the fact of being women helps to cry, and maybe the lament. No, maybe the men could cry also. But it really helped. But the place then when there was a little questionnaire, and everybody says like, "Wow, being welcome in a chapel." That was. So it was very beautiful, and I really lived there this experience that Christians, we are trusted by other religions as our able of helping to reconcile, and also, as you mentioned, being a place to host others. Thank you.
Anything?
Yes, good evening. My name is Sue Bird, and I attend Holy Trinity Brussels. It's an Anglican pro-cathedral, which you perhaps know. And the Anglican Church just recently has suffered, been challenged with a really big issue at national level, which has forced the resignation of the Archbishop of Canterbury. And that is to do with safeguarding and abuse. And the report that recorded what had happened, how it had happened, went into detail. This was an external report, it wasn't a report done by the church, it was an external report. Found that the church had hidden things, had pushed, we say in English, pushed under the carpet very important things which should have been aired earlier. Now, hearing from the inside a little bit, and being a little bit more charitable maybe, we think it could have been a case that these allegations were so serious within the church and against members of the clergy who were well respected by the church and in their community, apparently. So you wouldn't go straight away to accuse that person, you would give them chance. You would give chance for reconciliation. You would give chance for dialogue. You would give chance for, you know, any victim to be reparated with. But as it turned out, that turned sour for the Anglican Church, because we were in the position we were, you know, at national level and with the public, clearly not on good terms with the public on that issue, and as I say, which led to the resignation of the Archbishop of Canterbury. So, yeah, I don't think that's a good message for that sort of reconciliation, but let's take a step back and say, well, okay, we can learn from that, and we can build on what we've learned and do things in relation to safeguarding a bit differently. And it's not just about safeguarding per se, I think it's about the church systems as well, and the way the church works. And that may be a longer-term journey that the Anglican Church has to go through. But we're still faced, I suppose, with reconciliation to the nation, with the nation, and that's going to take some time. However, I do note, you know, it's very biblical that you know, no sin is not pardonable, and I think the church, the rank and file of the church, we just continue. I mean, we continue to worship, we continue to meet, we continue to have faith. We recognise as a national church the failings, and probably as individuals, you know, as members of that church, we recognise the failings as well. So I suppose the reconciliation in that context has to be in the longer term, and we will see, you know, it's not there yet. But yeah, a complex story about what is reconciliation and what isn't reconciliation, clearly. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Just add a little comment to that, having been working with the Archbishop of Canterbury throughout a lot of this time, that he also sees a difference between the institutional response to these cases and the requirement for us before God to respond to these cases. And they shouldn't be different, but they often are different. And he has publicly shared his, and resigned over it, his huge sadness that there weren't more within the church who were able to stand up, even when the institution is saying we must protect ourselves, we mustn't come under scrutiny. And I think that extends to many of our churches. There is abuse right across society and abuse within the church, tragically. And perhaps the challenge that I'm taking away from this time at the moment is, how do we respond honestly and in truth before our Lord, even when it contradicts what our institution is telling us that we should do? I don't know if that's helpful, but you had a...
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Adriana, and thanks for this evening. Very inspiring conversation. Well, the question was whether we see the church, any of our churches, acting as a reconciler. And I would like to share with you a testimony just of a community that I know of. situated in the countrysides around the city of Arezzo in Tuscany. So in those beautiful settings, but rather simple, you know, talking about rural areas, there's a community called Rondine, Cittadella della Pace, the city of peace, which I find an excellent and very brilliant idea, very brilliant project that has been carrying on for, I think, 30 years about, which seeks to bring together young people from countries in conflict. And these young people are selected, they are invited to live in this community for, I think, about a year or a school year. And by the end of that year, they will have learned so much about each other. They will have talked every day to one another. You know, so imagine a Palestinian and an Israeli, a Russian and a Ukrainian, and you name, or many other conflicts in Africa, for example, really from around the world. And these young people learn that their enemy is actually exactly like themselves. They learn to love, to understand each other, they learn to listen, they learn the art of dialogue. And that experience then is expected to be continued once they're back in their country at micro level, in their own communities, in their own villages, etc. So as to act as multipliers of dialogue and peace. I've always found it as such an inspiring and brilliant intuition, and a project which should really inspire many of us on how to build peace, starting from the individuals. Starting from small groups of people who can just encounter at their very human level and discover many more alikeness than divergences.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. And the students of Rondine often talk about the challenge, you know, as you spoke about the heartache of dialogue with your enemy, the rawness that you go through before you even come to a place where you can begin to recognize this enemy of mine can also be this friend of mine, despite our disagreement, our major disagreement. It's a wonderful model. Thank you.
Marisol, you wanted to say something?
Yes, that you wanted to say something.
So, two things that have come to my mind in this discussion we are having. One of them has to do with the witness the church can give to society. Very interested in what you said. Maybe you can go a bit further on that, on the reconciliation between church and society, church and nation. It's a very interesting thought. But I was thinking, as there are these very good examples of reconciliation, of the work of the churches in trying to bring together. CEC has, and we have Caterina with us, this Pathways for Peace initiative. So it's a lot of work going on in church, trying to not only give a witness of reconciliation, but always trying to work for reconciliation in different places. And I think that's very good. But I think the church in itself, when you find a community, a church community that is really working well, it's really living the experience of ecclesiology, of church, of being a church, you really have a witness of unity in that community. Unity between different people, different ages, different social proveniences of the people. So really the church is called to be a witness to unity. And I think this is important. And then I think this issue of safeguarding what has happened now with Bishop Welby, what has happened in the Catholic Church in many places, I think this really calls us to a deep thought, a deep acknowledgement of what has gone bad. And maybe it also makes us think of a need to change things, change the way power is exercised in the church, and other things. So it's a very big issue. It's a very big issue. I think as churches we have to really think a lot about this and make changes. But I'm happy you brought it up.
Yeah, perhaps also one example from my side by this question which you have raised, which came to my mind, and I think I can really say that there is not one parish only which I have in mind, but parishes all over Europe developing this kind of work, is that because, I mean, in nearly all European societies we observe that there is polarization and people are not speaking with one another anymore, or they don't come together anymore together. And there are parishes and churches who try to do something, to offer something there, to bring people together, but also observing that they will not come to the church as a church building, because that is for them and for other people not a neutral place, but a church. So what they start is to go in the public sphere and to start there something, like a cafe or like a center of coming just together, to do something together, so that people can meet in the area of the neighborhood or on the quarter of a town to exchange something, to buy something. Sometimes it's about food, sometimes it's about clothes, fashion, and so on. But to offer something, a space, a public space, where different people can come together and exchange and start to learn again also, well, it is good to be these people and to meet these people and to speak with one another and to discover again, okay, we might not disagree, we might not agree of every question, also in political sense, but we can restart to talk with one another, and this really in a physical way, not by the smartphones and so on, but really in meeting face to face and to discover again what the other person is and is about. Yeah? And even to speak about, there is also this kind of project to say, well, let us come together and think about what this place, this neighborhood, this quarter in town, what will that be in the future? How do we would like to shape this future together? And their churches discover they can be a place to offer this, and not in the church building, but they can start something to bring people together, to restart working together, coming together and thinking, how do we want to shape our future here, in the neighborhood, in the town. And then also people start again really to come together and discover something between them. So there I have the impression, what I read, what I hear, where I also meet people from churches, they are very courageous and also creative on that to build something like that. And I think that is also needed today.
Yeah, thank you.
That's a little bit relating to what you have there about hospitality.
Yes, I was thinking, yes.
I think hospitality is something, and I mean that is deep into our Christian roots also, to be hospitable.
Hospitable.
Yes. That's it. Yes.
But actually, the same root as hospitality is hostility.
Oh, yeah.
Very interesting, isn't it? That
Yes.
Hospitality, in some ways, we can see is overcoming hostility. And it's, many things in the word we can think about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure what to say, but at least I will recommend you two things. During the winter holidays, I had a chance to see a movie. For a long time, I didn't see a movie. I didn't know it. It was recommended by the EIA, but it was a good recommendation. So this movie, the name of this movie is "Do You Believe?" It's an American movie made 10 years ago. It's about a pastor, an American pastor, who is interpreted by a street preacher at the crossroad with this question: do you believe? And he answered, of course, I'm a pastor, I believe. And afterwards he realized that everything he's doing impacted on all the people around him. So I recommend this film for you in order to it's a good film. So But the second recommendation, it's going exactly in the same direction that Father Manuel said. I recommend you to go to the church in order to be reconciled. In the Eucharist, in the liturgy, we are reconciled with Christ, but also with each other. We are giving the peace. How you say when you say that Christ is among us,
Sharing the peace.
sharing the
Yes.
peace among us, and so on. But also receiving the peace of God. And the third thing I would like to remember you also tonight, and I will pass the word to my two predecessors. We have to give to the Caesar what belongs to the Caesar. And I mentioned in my intervention that sometimes the political power use religion in their goals. But also, and we are living this reality, at least here in Europe, also the political institution gave us the possibility to meet each other. Even sometimes it's not good for us because we want the dialogue with the institution, not between us, to be organized by the states. But the states and also the European institution, starting with the Council of Europe in Strasbourg, also European institution, they created this kind of platforms in order to meet together as Christian, Jews, Muslim, and to discuss some important topics of our society.
Any other questions or thoughts? Yeah. We have two here.
Hello. Good evening. I'm Haji Saji. I'm part of the Filipino Catholic Chaplaincy, and I'm very happy to be part of this conference, and I'm inspired really with this dialogue. Perhaps this question is not comfortable, but I think it's good if I ask these questions so that you can perhaps give your thoughts and dispositions about this question. So how can Christian reconciliations meaningfully address the systemic issues of white supremacy, racism, and marginalization of minorities like migrant churches or international communities like us within the church, or especially in the Belgian society or context? I think without reducing these complex problems to be mere theological or spiritual abstracts. So perhaps you can offer your thoughts. This is coming from migrant community.
I'll give a very mini starting response to give you some time to think. The first thing I want to say is that reconciliation is often understood to be the powerful saying, we want everyone to be like we are, and then we're reconciled. And so the first reflection I have is that reconciliation should be the other way up, the upside down reconciliation. I think Jesus himself modeled upside down reconciliation.
And I really appreciate the 12 habits because you put the first thing implementation.
Yes.
It's really struck me.
Well, all of that comes from really looking at how did Jesus model in his ministry, even in the 3 years of his ministry. Who did he interact with? How did he show respect to them? Who did he choose? And of course, it was an upside down model. He wasn't going to the Roman authorities and those who could spread his message far and wide. He actually went the opposite way. So that's the first thought. Second thought is, I just from the field, from experience, really believe that reconciliation is rooted in every single person or being seen and heard and valued or loved. you know, as Christians, we can bring the big love word in, that unconditional love. If reconciliation is about being seen and heard and loved, that has to start with those who feel least seen and least heard and least loved by the society as a whole. And again, that reverses the order of who is invited to the negotiating tables or to the reconciling tables. We have the powerful at the back and those who are least powerful at the front. Then we see wisdom, and actually then we see a sustainable model for reconciliation that really can stick. And I've seen small examples of that in Rwanda and in many parts of the world, actually, Asia, Southeast Asia as well. So that's just some starting thoughts.
Yeah, thank you very much for this crucial question, and also there I have not a holistic answer to it, but perhaps also I have not understood it totally correctly, so then you say what I've understood wrong. But going in that direction, I think another part of reconciliation process is also, there I'm not coming from war and for Second World War, for instance. I'm German, coming from German situation. I think there also it was very important, and now making things very, very short, it was a long, long process, and one could also make a whole evening and conference about that, of course, is that the question of speaking the truth and who is speaking it, yeah, and is those who have done that, in that sense, in the war, yeah, in the Germany and the Nazi regime, do they really come and it's clear that they speak out what has happened and what they have done, yeah, and so that is, I think, also an important moment for a reconciliation process. So that, of course, because you said the voices of the how do you phrase it?
Those who are least seen,
heard, and have to be heard.
Yeah.
True.
Yes.
But then, of course, a very important step is that those who have to be addressed and who were the colonized, or the
perpetrators or the colonizers.
Yes. Then it is their part to say, well, what has happened, yeah, and why has that happened, and what have we done there, yeah, and to get about that. And there I observe in my ecumenical context that I would say, perhaps this is also a little bit general, but that there are some countries and churches are really ahead, like in Great Britain, there's a lot of discussion and debate and work on that, or also in the Netherlands, but not so much in other countries, as far as I can see for the moment. Perhaps also there I'm wrong, yeah, but that is what I observe. And we have still there also, like for instance also in Germany, for other reasons, to learn to think about that. What was our part, our role in this history, and what does it mean also for our society still today, and how we deal in the world, yeah, and so that I think is also an important step.
Yes.
So speaking the truth and to relate to this truth also in this process. And I think we are still not everywhere there about having that in front.
Thank you.
I want to thank you very much for this question. I think it's really important, and you really opened for me a new line of thought that I wasn't very much aware, because I've been parish priest in Spain 20 years in a parish in Madrid. And there my work was trying to make really a community where all people could be welcome without making differences. But you're telling me, I think you're Catholic, no? You're telling me that you experience, maybe here in Belgium, no?
Yes.
There are?
And also some priests, the Filipino priests, they really feel it when they doing this gathering, and they said, we feel that we're marginalized, we're not part of this community, but
Well, that's very upsetting, huh? That's very upsetting. That's very upsetting. I mean, from a Catholic point of view, and I've spoken with the bishops here, it's understandable that there are national communities. I mean, you have the Filipinos, you have Spanish-speaking community, Polish community, Slovak community. That makes sense. And I know there's been an attempt here in Brussels to not to insist on this. I mean, to try that people integrate in the parishes where they live, and they don't go to their national community, so they get integrated into the. So I don't know what is the best choice. That sometimes is a pastoral discussion, whether it's good to have national communities or whether the people that come from outside have to integrate in the normal church, But I would say if this is felt, it's quite upsetting. It's quite, and I think this has to be addressed in some way.
But Father, but it's because I'm working, 5 years working with the grassroots faith-based communities. I'm also working with the Protestant, evangelical, really, especially the migrant churches or the international churches. They're having hard time, to be integrated, with this institutional church, fellowships. That's why when you ask the question, what your church doing about reconciliations, for me that makes sense to me, because it seems that doing reconciliation is given to the established and they have power, to do this. But migrant churches, particularly for us, we cannot say this kind of reconciliations among Belgian churches, because we feel that we are very segregated. It's not only that, in practice, but also terms of policy, like languages. They're imposing this. You need to learn French and Dutch.
Just a thought, and that is that if reconciliation is understood as being gathered together into the mother church, however you define that, I'm not sure that is reconciliation in terms of gospel reconciliation or the reconciliation that Jesus meant. I think reconciliation is about how we demonstrate to our community that we are modelling what it looks like to be reconciled to God in Christ, and therefore, from that place, to be reconciled to our brothers and sisters in our community. And in doing that, to show or to model a reconciling presence to the wider community. It may be that the mother church needs to be modelled to, if you like. It may be that being reconciled into the mother church is not actually a Christ reconciling movement, if you like. That actually you, and I don't mean just the migrant churches, I mean any Christian community, the first priority is this upward reconciling movement, and then in turn the outward reconciling movement, and then the ripple effect of that on everybody else who's out there. And it slightly shifts the dynamic of suggesting that either the mother church should be the centre of the reconciling movement, or that the mother church definitely should not be. It should be a dispersed movement. A completely separate challenge that I often love to throw out in America, but I'll just throw it out here in Europe, and that is that the churches who have outside the big banners saying we are an inclusive church, and this word inclusivity is often mistaken for being a reconciling church. Everybody's welcome in our church, except anyone who doesn't think like we think. And if you don't think like we think, then you're not part of our inclusivity. And so, of course, inclusivity becomes exclusive, in fact. So we mistake the language sometimes that we use, whether it's reconciling language or whether it's inclusive language. We mistake it for something very human and very controlling. And in fact, it should be the opposite. It should be something that is being given away all the time. And if we are, whoever we are, we're the centre of that giving away, because it's coming from up above, that for me is the real image of being a reconciling presence that any of us can be. We don't need to have the permission of others. I don't know if that means.
One of the texts that was suggested for also this meeting this afternoon is a text by Ephesians that says we're all one in Christ. There's no woman, there's no man, there's no slave, there's no free man, there's no Jew, there's no Greek. We're all one. So the church is called to give this witness. So what you're saying is just a counter witness that we're giving. I would say, and we have to reflect on this.
Yes.
Are we near the end of time? I'm not sure of the time. I don't want to hold any of you up. But
There's a question.
oh yes, another
No?
thought. Yes, please.
When I was listening, thank you so much, I was thinking of two contradictory thoughts, which I think that is okay that they are contradictory. First is that we Christians we have been disagreeing since the very beginning.
Yeah.
So we just need to look at Paul and Peter, and when we read what Paul writes about Peter in his letter, it's not kind at all. It's very tough. So, even if we go to the apostles, they were already disagreeing who is the biggest one. So, I think that in part of our communities is to disagree, and I think in many Christian communities, there's always disagreement. So, this is part of us, and in accepting this is our human nature. But at the same time, I read some years ago a book by Cardinal Walter Casper about the unity of Christians, and he has a big desire for unity, and you see this during his book. He's trying to overcome everything, and at the end he says, but even if we try so hard to break the body of Christ, we Christians didn't manage. And for me this is really like living the body of Christ. The universal church is one, we are one, and even if we make hard and we quarrel, we will not manage to make the body.
Well, what a beautiful way to bring us to a close. Thank you so much for that. And thank you to our guests tonight and for modelling for us, as well as sharing your wisdom with us. It's been wonderful. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
So the name of the Chapel for Europe, and I hear the name of us all. Thank you very much, all of you. You have presented your ideas, you have entered our reflection, and I think there was a lot of things where we still can continue to reflect upon. Thank you very, very much for that. Thank you for coming here from the Rose Castle Foundation and to facilitate this. I think it's a very good thing to cooperate together also. We will have 2 more evenings with this How to Disagree Well with this title. On the 11th of February it will be a round table rather with in the interreligious field. So with Muslim and Jewish partners and Christian partners. And then a 3rd evening in May, that would be the, when is it? 13th of May. Then it is rather about how we do it in our society, all the changes we experience there, the chaos and conflict that we have there, so more the secular field. So you are invited to those evenings. Also, together the chapel and the Rose Castle Foundation. Concerning the ecumenical things, here you may have heard that we at the chapel have once a week on Thursdays at 1 o'clock an ecumenical prayer, followed with a small lunch. So trying to really do it continuously, coming together, except this Thursday, because we are in the week of the prayer for the unity of Christians, and this Thursday is the big ecumenical prayer of all the churches of Brussels together, and in the evening at 19 p.m. In the Protestant Church of the Place du Nouveau Marché au Grain à 8. And so we really want to come to pray together with all the churches. That would be a good opportunity on Thursday. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's very kind.
I will do, thank you.
Last wine together or to share our thoughts downstairs.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Such great
Bring us together.
actually, really inspiring.
That's many thanks. Yeah, thank you for association. This issue should work.
Years and years. And he's broken, not genuinely not for himself, but he's the church. Just feels it's been the issue was actually a very well